this for another 5-minute murder. It's Christmas Eve. Sorry, guys, I've been a little bit late again, so I probably got another tardy slip. But it's been a busy week. I have been busy trying to get True Crime Myths and Legends finished, all of the stuff done, everything ready to go for the release. Hopefully, we will be releasing mid-January. That's the plan right now. The book or the manuscript is currently out being edited as we speak. The illustrations by the incredible Kenny Baker are done. The foreword by E.J. Hammond is done. All of that stuff is ready to rock and roll. And the biggest news of all is the pre-order is now live at scorpionlairgames.com. So if you want to get an early first print edition and you want to get it right now, go there today and pick up your copy. There is paperback and hardback. All of the editions, the pre-order editions, will come with a little personal message from me. And you'll also get a signature and a date in there. So that way, you know exactly when it was done. So yeah, we'll be getting those shipped out. We got to get everything uploaded into the Amazon KDP store. So once that's done, it will probably be late January, early February before those things ship out. Just so you know, this is the pre-order. So make sure you pre-order that and get it ready to go. It's going to be fantastic. Our very, very first order was placed by none other than E.J. Hammond herself. And the book's got to be good. She's already read it and she ordered the first copy. So, it's got to be good. Or she'd have been like, I'll get it later, Jeff, off the discount shelf. But there you go. We're going to get into this murder here real quick, seeing as I'm late and I'm talking. So let's see what we got today. All right, man. This guy right here. We got, for Christmas Eve, we got a little mob influence. So this Charles Lucky Luciano was an American mobster that was born in November 24th, 1897. He died on January 26, 1962, of old age, interestingly enough. But he was the one who split New York City into 5 crime families, heading the Genovese crime family for himself. He also initiated the Commission, which served as a governing body for organized crime nationwide. Luciano moved to Havana and was later deported to Italy, living out his final years in Naples. So, this guy right here, Charles Lucky Luciano, is the guy who really created the mafia that we know, right? The ideas of the Godfather all really came from him. He was the one that started all of that stuff here in this country. So, of course, The Godfather is very, very much influenced by Luciano and other people. There have been movies later on that have come out that have featured him in there. I think there's one called Mobsters that has Lucky Luciano in it, as well as Frank Costello and several other of the early figures, right? Because they were all friends. They all moved over here from Sicily. And when they came here, it was the old Mustache Pete days, right? And the two bosses were, trying to think now. Why can't I think of their names? Anyway, Salvatore Maranzano and Big Joe. Why can't I think of his last name now? But anyway, there were 2 big bosses at the time, but that was back in the old Mustache Pete days. They had their own area. They were constantly fighting over one another. And Lucky Luciano and his crew of 3 other guys. You had Meyer Lansky, who was kind of the brains behind the organization. You had Vito Genovese, who was kind of the muscle. And then you had the guy who started Vegas and went out there, who was another guy who was not Italian, interestingly enough, But you had Bugsy Siegel. He was another one that would be one of the four, along with Lucky Luciano, to really start everything. And those guys went, and they ended up siding with one of the two big bosses. They ended up killing the other one. I think they sided with Maranzano and killed the other one in a restaurant, or vice versa. I don't remember exactly. But then they would take over those different places. They would end up taking over their territories. And it was interesting because Luciano and Meyer Lansky would come up with the idea that no one person was in control, that they needed to be more like the federal government, where there were different branches, and everybody had to agree that no one person could just force all of these things to happen. Because in the past it was a huge mistake, it caused lots of infighting, so they wanted to bring it to a place where it was more streamlined. Now they came up with a system where there are 5 families in New York. Those 5 families now control all of organized crime in the United States. And they would have to work together to okay any big hits, any big scams, and they would all share in the profits. They would have to kick up to the big bosses, the head of the 5 families. So it was a great system. And for probably 50, 60 years in this country, that system worked fantastic. And it probably is still working now. We just don't hear about it nearly as much because many of those businesses and many of those scams became legitimate, right? And they have found all kinds of other ways to get into skimming off the top, right? It's not just prostitution and gambling now. Now it's all kinds of things. So they have found their ways into legitimate business, which was always the goal anyway. Because, back then it was either you're dead or you end up in jail. And so they didn't want that, so they wanted to find ways that they could get into legitimate business and make money, because what they found is the higher you get, the more crooked it is. So, and it's still true in our society now. But fascinating guy. Lucky Luciano would get himself in a bunch of trouble. Trying to think of who it was, but he eventually got involved with all of the stuff going down in Havana, and he was going to go down there and set up a bunch of casinos and things like that. It was Thomas Dewey is the guy, and he was, I believe, in the FBI, or anyway, Dewey, him and Lucky Luciano did not get along. There ended up being an attempt to kill Dewey. Luciano actually stopped the hit on Thomas Dewey because Dewey was really cracking down on organized crime. And so he kind of stopped the hit, but Dewey didn't stop, right? I think that Luciano was hoping that Dewey would then overlook everything, but he was super straight-laced and was not going to do that at all. Dewey ends up, instead of, throwing Luciano in prison for the rest of his life here in the United States, he deports him back to Italy. And of course, Luciano goes back to Italy after the failed Havana attempt, and he does a bunch of things there. That's not the end of his life. He actually ends up being very prolific and running things on the Italian side of the mafia for a long time before he passes away of old age. Not so dissimilar to Michael, sitting out in the sun in The Godfather Part 3 and just passing away, there in the Tuscan sun, I guess. So, yeah, fascinating guy. Lucky Luciano is the linchpin of all of organized crime here in the United States. He is, the guy who figured it all out and brought all the right people together. There are some that would argue that the one who really came up with all the ideas was Meyer Lansky, and I think that probably a lot of that is true. Meyer was a very smart guy, Jewish guy, and he could not be a part of the mafia because he was not Italian, but he was Lucky Luciano's right-hand man. He was If you want to look at The Godfather, he was the consigliere, right? He was the counselor. He was the one that really advised Lucky on all the dealings that he did. And if you watch the show Boardwalk Empire, both Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano and Bugsy Siegel are all part of that show. And it's interesting to see that in that early time, we're talking, I guess, 1920s, 1930s, this is before they've come up and before they've taken over everything. And they're still kind of small-time hoods. And you can see how much more aggressive Lucky Luciano is versus Meyer Lansky, and how calculating Meyer is, and how he is always coming up with the numbers, always figuring out the best angles, and always trying to talk down the more hot-headed Luciano to doing things smarter. So it's fascinating. Go and watch that show, Boardwalk Empire. Great show with Steve Buscemi in it as I forget what his name is in that movie. But anyway, he's like the he starts off as being like the treasurer in Atlantic City, I think, and then he ends up becoming basically a hood. But he is I want to say that he is Irish or something, or Scottish. Anyway, in that show, great show. Check it out. Boardwalk Empire. But thank you guys for another 5-minute murder. I don't know, about 10-minute murder today. But I give you a little extra since I'm late. So have a Merry Christmas. Remember that there is a sale going on Scorpion Lair Games. 10% off of Killers, a card game. And 50% off the shadow boxes and prints. So go there and order that. I know y'all getting Christmas money tomorrow. Make sure you go and spread the love over there. And then while you're there, pre-order True Crime Myths and Legends. That is there, available for that pre-order. Pick that up. Get either the paperback or the hardback and get it signed and dated and all that good stuff. Anyway, check it out. I will talk to y'all later. See you soon. Have you ever wanted to be a detective, to investigate the crime scene and catch the criminal? Well, welcome to Death, New Mexico, a town just off the famous Route 666. A pretty quiet town until recently. There have been a string of murders. In the social deduction game, The Profiler, you have 60 minutes to investigate the crime scene, interrogate your witnesses, and determine who the killer is and what kind of killer they are to win. What will happen when you become the profiler?
This looks like a job for me, so everybody just follow me, cause we need a little controversy, cause I feel so empty without me. I said